Welcome back, Big D, Derek Lambert. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys will take your time to listen to this story. This is from Nicole. Nicole has a recovery channel on YouTube. You guys need to go check it out. If you're into recovery, you're looking for a meeting, especially those of you who've been shunned by some people in the recovery community for taking substances like Suboxone or methadone or even kratom, which I hold no opinions on. I'm a big fan of, if you make it out alive, thank you. That's what I'm about. I'm not against you. I'm not for these substances, so don't get me out there going, you need to get on. But I always recommend whatever gets you off the street and keeps you from dying and has a better life potential for you to live a life. That's what I'm for. Nicole has meetings like that. They're Mara meetings. Go check her YouTube channel out. Make sure you guys subscribe, because me and her, we've had our heads bumped before in the past. But I want to show you guys what recovery is all about. Stay tuned. Nicole, how's it going? Welcome to the channel.
It's going good. Thanks for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here. A little bit nervous, and I'm never nervous, so that tells you something.
Well, I'm glad that you're here with me, and I get to get your story. You had me on your channel. It's only fair that I welcome you onto mine. I wanted to ask you, Nicole, let's get right into some of the history of your story, stuff that maybe you've mentioned in passing on your channel, but I literally want you to dig deep. I want you to go back. Your family and where you come from, was there drug addiction? If so, what kind of drugs? And do you think they had an influence on you becoming what you became in terms of active addiction?
Okay. Well, when I was growing up, like in my immediate family, my mom and my dad, they're both, they've never done drugs. They've never, drank. They're not alcoholics, but my parents' struggle with addiction, alcoholism in particular. And then my mother's brothers and sisters struggle with substance abuse and cocaine, crack, marijuana. In fact, a couple of my uncles have been to prison on my mother's side for drug addiction, distributing and buying and selling drugs. But when I was growing up, we were really away from that side of our family. I grew up in Arkansas. That side of my family lives in California, and the other side of my family lives in New York. So when I was growing up, it was just me, my mom, my dad, and my two little sisters. And I'm the oldest of three girls. So being an older sibling, I always felt this like pressure to be the leader, to take care of my sisters, just to be that person that they could look up to. And when I was growing up, I always struggled with this. I don't know how to explain it any other way than just feeling like I wasn't like everyone else. I'm talking from a young age. And my mom is Mexican and my dad is Italian. And we moved to this small town in Arkansas. And when I was growing up from kindergarten till about fourth or fifth grade, I went to this school where everybody there was real country, a lot of just white kids. I think it was me and this other girl were Mexican girls, and then three black guys. And that's it. And so I was always already different from everybody else. And like I said, Arkansas, where I grew up at that time, back in 1980 something, prejudice was still very much alive. And so I got bullied a lot. I got called taco. I got called burrito. I got called spick. I got called wetback. I mean, and these are things that I had never heard before. Growing up in my household, my mom was extremely religious. Extremely. Like, we were in this church, it was United Pentecostal. We couldn't cut our hair. We couldn't wear earrings. We couldn't wear makeup. Just very, very strict religious background. And so going to school, having people picking on me a little bit, I always felt like, I didn't quite fit in. Well, once I got old enough to start making my own decisions, we moved from that church and we got into this non-denominational church. And so church has always been a big part of my upbringing. My mom wanted me and my sisters to, have a relationship with God. And I did, until I got into high school and I started picking and choosing my own way. And just like a lot of girls, and I feel like on your channel, I'm sure a lot of guys can relate to you, but to me, like, I struggled with this body image, with not feeling that I was pretty enough, not feeling that I was good enough, feeling like I was too fat, when honestly back then I was not even fat. I was hot as hell. You know what I mean? Like, I I was in shape. I was young. I was a cheerleader.
Right.
I was things, you know?
My wife
And so
actually,
I
my
looked,
wife struggles with that today, and I'm like, what? And I don't get the body image the same way a woman does, but as a man, I felt that way. I'd see myself in the mirror. You're fine. Don't worry about the dog.
he never barks ever. I think he's hearing your voice and he's
It's I'm a guy. Yeah. So
that's Paco.
I can relate on that, being why I ended up getting on steroids, because I wanted to look like strong, and it really did transform me and made me, but it also changed my mind, which is also why my wife did Adderall. She said, Derek, I didn't do it necessarily for the high. It wasn't, she told me it was the biggest thing is that it made her lose weight and it made her feel good about herself by looking good. It also, because she's a super sensitive woman like you are, to a point to where it numbed the sensitivities so that she wasn't so hypersensitive. Plus, she has like separation anxiety and stuff like that. So, like, it helped her feel sufficient without, like, I don't know how to describe it, but like, if I had to go to work out of town, which I did for 4 years, she felt very, very alone. And it
Yeah.
made her feel like she had comfort, like Percocets did for us, or what, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to say my story is a lot like yours in many ways already, with the religious stuff and that upbringing.
And the thing about it is, it's like, it was all like my parents couldn't have done a better job. They were strong. My mom is a strong woman. My dad is a strong man. My dad worked hard. There was times where he worked all night long and then came home and went to basketball games or softball games with me because I was in band. I was a cheerleader. I was playing sports. Like, we were all really well rounded. And my mom would be cooking home cooked meals, three meals a day. Like, my parents did an amazing job. But it was ever since I was young, like I said, there's just this feeling of inadequacy inside of me, and I have struggled with that feeling all my life. And now that I look back on it, I realize that my dad struggled with the same feelings. When my dad was younger, he tells me stories about when he started doing cocaine. He used to jump the railroad tracks back in New York. Okay, so when my dad was growing up, he lived in Brooklyn, New York. And one of the things the kids would do was him and his buddies would jump on the train, grab the back of it, hold on, and go down the tracks and then jump off at the next place they wanted to jump off at. Well, my dad, they had this little place that they would hang out, smoke doobies, and do cocaine. One day, he said he was jumping on the track and his legs went under the train and he was holding on and he was about to be killed by this train. He was high and he was like, that's when I realized, like, I'm going to die. I got to quit doing this. And this is just him dabbling as a young teenager. But it was always like he felt the same way I did, like this insecurity and this need to fit in. He was real skinny, lanky when he was growing up. Then he started lifting weights. Now my dad's this big ass Italian dude. But like, when I look at him and I look at me, I realize my dad, I am exactly the way he was. And now that I've gotten older and I see how I was in high school and I see that I was searching for this place to fit in and this validation from other people, I carry that through my life with me. And it was like the perfect storm. I was started to date boys. I was 17 years old. I had got my first boyfriend. I fell in love. And we were together and he smoked pot. He went to another school and I thought he was the bee's knees. Like, I was like, this dude is so fine. I'm going to hang out with him all the time. And so I did. And we were together for like 5 years. But in that relationship, that's when I tried pot for the first time. I started drinking. And then once I started drinking and doing pot on the weekends, like I was a weekend warrior. Like, I would party. Like I said, I was a cheerleader. So I was at the football games on Friday night. And then I was at the after party afterward and the parties on Saturdays, So it's like right in the middle of that social setting, smoking, drinking, partying. Dumped Robert, started dating the football player, this guy that was like the, what is it called when they're the quarterback of the football team. And I had hit it. I was like, I'm popular. I'm dating the quarterback of our football team. And I was at a whole new high in my use of drugs. guy could get cocaine. Okay. His name was Monster, we'll call him, but he was a black guy, and he was the first black guy I had ever dated. And I remember, bringing him home to meet my parents, and my dad was so cool. My parents were so kind, and I really liked him, but he started introducing me to like more like hardcore substances, like cocaine. Once I tried cocaine, I realized that stimulants were the most amazing thing that I had ever met in my life. I was like, this is it. But I still somehow maintained like going to school. By my junior year, I was flunking out though of all my classes. And by my senior year, I was snorting cocaine and methamphetamine. And I had all D's on my report card. And my parents were like, what is going on? I would go to the basketball game to cheer. And one night I was drunk. I had drank Seagram 7 and 7-Up, went to the game, was cheering, and I got arrested at the basketball game and taken to jail and booked on a public intox. Oh my mom came to pick me up, and my dad, like, just imagine, like, they didn't realize that what was going on at the time. My sister was struggling with bipolar, and so they were trying to get my sister in check. So I was just running off the rails, and they came to pick me up. And that's when I just told my parents, like, I'm getting fucked up, I'm using, and they tried to intervene and help me. They tried to ground me. They tried to make me stay home and never leave, but it didn't. I was doing what I wanted to do. I would sneak out of the house. I would spend the night over at my friends' houses and never come home. At 17 and a half, almost 18 years old, I hadn't even graduated high school yet. By the time I graduated high school, I barely even passed. I passed high school by the skin of my teeth. My grandmother flew all the way down from New York to watch me walk across the stage and get my diploma, because I was her first grandchild to get my diploma. And so it was a huge deal, but it wasn't, because I barely, like my dad said, he goes, I don't even know why we're celebrating. She passed with all D's. All D's for DeMayo.
Oh my DeMayo.
I know he was ashamed. I mean, I know he was like, don't give her any credit because she didn't do anything, And that right there kind of started my whole trip of disappointing my parents. Like I was constantly, I had so much potential and I could have done so much, but once I tried drugs, I loved the way they made me feel. And that combination of being insecure, having low self-esteem, not feeling like I fit in, and using to fit in. And nobody told me, hey, Nicole, you got to get high with us so you could be cool. Nobody said that, but I felt that I needed to do that. And when I took drugs, they made me feel like I was somebody else. Like I wasn't that insecure, chubby Nicole, And so I kept doing that. And that's what really, that helped. That drugs took everything from me. But at that time, I felt like it gave me like an advantage over other people. And I couldn't even see that I was basically forfeiting my whole life to addiction. And so when I graduated out of high school, I did sign up to go to college, and I stayed in college for about a year, and I failed out because I was high on methamphetamine the whole time. And once I failed college, my parents kicked me out of their house. They were like, we can't watch you. We can't do this. We can't watch you kill yourself anymore. And that's when it began. Like I started staying wherever. I moved in with a dope cook, a methamphetamine cook. And
did you go from just snorting it to, are you shooting it up by now? Or at what point because I know you know how it goes. Okay. It progresses. Well, take us through some of that while you're telling us through the history of this.
Okay. So my addiction progressed. It didn't progress really quickly. Can you hear that, dog?
You're good. You're good.
It didn't progress. It progressed over time, but so by the time I was about 18 or 19, my mom and dad kicked me out. I still had a job. I was working for a department store as the floor supervisor, but I was using methamphetamine, and at this time I was still snorting it and smoking it. It wasn't until about 2.5 good years of smoking and snorting methamphetamine and hanging around those same people, seeing people going back to the bedroom, coming out, because I was living in this trailer, okay? There was old cars outside. There was trash all over the place. It was your epic tweaker trailer. There was just stuff piled high to the sky, broken blinds. And I was living with this guy, and he was cooking methamphetamine. We would have people lined up out the trailer door, 20 people in line, waiting for him to finish a batch so they could get some. And that's how it was every night. Every night. We would have cameras set up watching the outside, so that way if anybody drove up that we didn't recognize, if the police came through, we would see them. But the thing about this house was it was at the end of a dead end. So there was only one way in and one way out. And so eventually the cops ended up posting up and watching us in there, and that house got raided and busted. I wasn't there that night, thank you, God. But it all came crumbling down, and I ended up getting it right after they did. So I started shooting up after about, like I said, 2 years of straight up use on methamphetamine. And the longer I stayed on it, the more I started wondering, why are they going back there to the bathroom? Why does everybody look like they are so much more high than me? And I had never even seen anybody shoot up before. This was totally new to me. So one night, one of my friends went back to the bathroom and came back out, and I stopped them and I said, what are y'all doing? And that's when they took me back to the bathroom and they showed me, and I told them I wanted to do that too. And you know how it goes with, I don't know, sure everybody knows that watches this video. No, Nicole, we're not going to be the first person to shoot you up. We don't want to introduce you to that life. We don't want to put you on like that. And I told them if they didn't do it, I was going to do it myself, even though I had no idea how to do it. And my friend did it for me. And that moment that happened, I was already hooked, but it took me down. It was so, I cannot explain it any other way. And I don't know if this is suitable for TV, but it was so strong that it was the strongest feeling I've ever felt happen to me in my whole entire life on a substance. And it made the hair on my head grow 16 feet long. It was so euphoric and erotic feeling, and I was hooked. And so I stayed up all night that night, well, for like a week after that, but teaching myself how to inject myself. And it wasn't until 6 months of injecting methamphetamine, I got arrested. I got pulled over. Actually, I got set up by these girls that lived in this house that we had just left. My dealer was driving my car. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and we got set up. We got surrounded by 3 detect cars, 2 on marked vehicles, and they threw him out of my car. My car was still rolling forward, and they threw him out. And I was screaming. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And they threw my car into park, and they said, get on the ground. And I was on the ground, spread eagle. And I was like, they caught me because I had all this dope in my car. He had dope in his sock. I had needles in my purse, and they were patting me down. You know, they knew my parents. I grew up in this town all my life. I had lived there. I was probably like 23, 24. Everybody knew me.
Yeah.
I made the front page of the newspaper, front page. And my dad, I remember him calling me and saying, you are on the front page of the newspaper. Like, you are taking our name through the gutter. How could you do this? He was so upset with me. And I couldn't tell him why I was doing it. I didn't realize at that time, once I started injecting, I knew I had a problem, but I hadn't started saying like, I'm an addict. You know, I hadn't started accepting the fact that I was really sick and that I needed help. I still thought that I had some kind of control over it.
A choice. It's just a choice. Why aren't you just choosing? It's simple, right, Nicole? Why aren't you just choosing to stop? It's that simple.
Right. And that's what my dad was asking me, like, why can't you just quit? Why can't you just quit? And that was Like, honestly, that was the very beginning of my downward spiral into so much more addiction. Like, after that, I went to prison. Like, they put me on probation for that charge, and I could not stay sober. I failed every single drug test, and I started dabbling in opiates, benzos, and I turned to alcohol because at the time I was trying to stay sober from everything else. So in my mind, my justification is I can't take pills, I can't shoot dope. I'll just drink. So I literally turned into an alcoholic. I drank every day, every night, went to work drunk, came home drunk, drove my car drunk, because I had to have something to take away this crazy, all this in my mind. And then the fact that I had gotten the felony charge, I was like, I'm never going to be able to get employment. I'm never going to be able to come back from this. I have ruined my life forever. And I truly believe that I had. And I look back on that time now and I realize, like, I didn't ruin my life, but that really did set me up for a lot more heartache later on down the road,
Exactly.
And so after I ended up going to prison, and because they revoked my probation, they were like, you can't stay sober. I probably stayed on probation for about 11 months. And I failed every single drug screen except for the first one. The first one they gave me, I passed. And my probation officer even sent me to treatment. She was like, here, you can go to rehab. We'll give you a chance. And so I went into rehab. They gave me a chance. And the rehab was like, listen, you've got a chance. Why don't you move down here? We'll let you live in a halfway house. We'll help you find a job. At that time, I was not ready. I was like, nah, I'm going back to Hot Springs. You know what I mean? And
yep.
And not even 30 days later, I was high, and I had to go see my probation officer, and that's when she told me, she was like, this is it, I'm revoking you, and you're going to prison.
So Nicole, let me fast forward you here, because a lot of what you said I totally relate to, the alcohol, the whole thing. You went from meth being your main choice, and then you are on opiates. Now I want to get to opiates because you've had a variety of substances you've used in your life, and opiates seem to be the last one that you ultimately have fought in. What happened there? What did you get hooked on at first? Did you progress like everyone else where you were painkillers, then found your way touching more, or what happened?
Well, I always knew that I liked painkillers because when I was about 17, I had gotten a prescription for Percocet because I got all my wisdom teeth pulled out. And you can ask my mom. She comes on my channel sometimes and she'll say, comment stuff, but she remembers it too because I had this bottle of like 20 Percocet. I probably took them in 2 days. She was like, I knew right then that there was something going on because I went to go see if your medicine was there and it was gone. And so I always knew that I liked the way it didn't matter if it was opiates. It didn't matter if it was benzos, meth, alcohol, crack. It didn't matter what it was. If it changed the way I felt, I was on that like white on rice. But the thing about it was methamphetamine was just so prevalent where I was at. I always dabbled with different substances, but at that time I was like on the meth. But when I got out of prison, I was like, I'm not going back to that meth. That shit ruined my life. I'm going to stay on the straight and narrow. And I paroled out to a halfway house here where I live now. And that's when I found Roxy's. And I had taken Roxy's, snorted them every now and then. And, they were cool and everything. But I had never injected Roxy's. I had never injected an opiate, period. And that's when, injecting for me was like the ultimate high. It took me to the level I wanted to go every single time. And I started injecting Roxy's. I probably stayed sober because they had me in a halfway house. I stayed sober for about 9 months. I got a job, got my car back, was paying my rent, was working a 12-step program with a sponsor, going to meetings, chairing the meetings. And I relapsed on Roxy's and I started injecting them. And living in the halfway house, there was other people who were also on, who were relapsing and stuff. And so not blaming it on them, but that's how I kind of got back into the gig. My next door neighbor, she had relapsed, and we were like, well, let's go get high together. And I started shooting the Roxys. I had always taken pills, benzos, opiates, Adipex, anything, but methamphetamine. Like every time I have an addiction or I go through a stage in my life, I always hone in on one substance, and then I'll use another substance just like when I don't have that one substance, And so when I was on the meth, if I didn't have meth, I'd get high on opiates. I'd eat me some methadone. I used to eat the wafers like they were going out of style. There was this guy who had these 40 milligram methadone wafers. They were big old giant pills, and they were 10 milligrams a piece on the wafer. So I would get those all the time. But meth was like what I was on. Then when I got out of prison, I switched it because in my mind it was like, well, methamphetamine ruined my life, so I'm going to use these opiates now. But opiates, they screwed me up because I couldn't go without having them. And if I didn't have them, I was sick as a dog. And so when I relapsed on opiates here where I live, I had nowhere to go. I was living on people's couches. I held on to my job for dear life. I had this little job working at a grocery store. I was the assistant manager, but I got demoted and I was just working as a regular clerk because they knew I had an addiction, because I would go in and I would be under the influence, and they tried to help me. They even sent me to treatment once. I've been to treatment 5 times. I've been sent twice by jobs, 3 on my own, and the last time I went is when it stuck, and it was because I had my son. But anyway, let me get into the opiates. So moving here to Little Rock where I live, it's inner city. There's a lot of gangs. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of craziness. Oh, I don't know. Sorry about that. I got on to opiates, like I said, relapsing with one of the girls from the treatment center. And I had always done them before, but I started shooting them up. And when I started shooting them up, I met this guy here in my town that I bought them from. He was my dealer 5, 6, 7 years. Like I knew him. We knew each other. And he would get large quantities of opiates, and then I would call him and he would sell me. I would front my whole check to him. My whole check. I would sign over the back of it and give it to him, or cash it and give him the whole thing, because what he would do was he would front me throughout the week, so that way I could make it, because I was trying. And honestly, like I was always trying to go to work. I was always trying to change my life, but I always wasn't quite doing what I needed to do to stay sober. Like being in the halfway house. I got into the halfway house. I would do what they asked me to do. I would stay sober. I would work the steps, but I wouldn't do this one thing, like, I don't know, stop hanging out with people that were getting high. That was one of the things that kept me relapsing, was I kept these people around me that were getting high. It's like I was hanging on to them for dear life,
Yeah, totally get it. Nicole, let me ask you something, because we're running out of time. All right, and we can do we. Oh,
forever.
You're fine. No, you're fine. Because you have many dynamics to your story. I know that you go more in depth on your own channel, which I recommend anybody who's watching go to your channel and they can keep up. Maybe you can go over there and comment and say, "Hey, Nicole, we want to hear more of your story," and you can go into your story more, whatever. I want to know what happened, because you've been to 5 treatments, you've been through this, you've been through that. What happened that got you from active addiction finally to, okay, I'm stable, I have a life now, like, it's not everything's peaches and roses and perfect, okay, but you don't live to use and use to live today. So what happened in between there?
Well, what happened was I ended up meeting my husband.
No, I'm just kidding.
In 2012, I met my husband. Now, I paroled out of prison in 2010. In 2012, I met my husband, and I fell in love. He was the first man who ever opened a car door for me. He was the first man who ever paid for anything. He was the first man who ever treated me not like a junkie, like a person. He treated me with respect. He loved me. And it just so happened that my husband was also an active drug addict. At the time when we met, he was on the methadone clinic. And I thought, wow, he's trying to get his life together. We can do this together. We can do this. So we started dating, and I got hooked on methadone. And I was basically eating all his methadone. Well, about a year and a half into our relationship, I ended up getting pregnant. And I didn't know I was pregnant. And my father-in-law came downstairs right here in this house, and he looked at me one night and he said, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "No, I'm not." Don't wish that on me. And he was right. I was pregnant. And I tried to get sober right away. I was like, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to get sober. I'm not going to use. I'm going to take care of my baby. Right? I didn't know if I was having a boy or a girl. So I quit sober. Well, that lasted all of like 3 weeks maybe, and I relapsed. And me and my husband were just in active addiction, constantly trying to get sober, then relapsing, trying to get sober, then relapsing, 2 active drug addicts, and I was pregnant. I wish I could come on this channel. I wish I could come on any channel and say, I got sober because I was pregnant for my son. But I didn't. I used the whole time I was pregnant. And when I gave birth to my son in July of 2014, July 4th, I was high on methamphetamine. And he was born, and he was perfect. They sent me home with him, and I got to have my son for about a year before he got taken from me. And a year after he was born, 2 days before his first birthday, DHS came knocking on my door, Child Protective Services, and I had to submit to a drug screen. My husband had to submit to a drug screen, and at that time, we both failed for opiates and benzos. Now, as you guys hear in my story, like I was addicted to multiple substances all the time. So at this time, I was shooting Roxy's and eating Xanaxes like they were candy. And so they told me they had to take my son. And so I had to drive down and give my son to some lady I didn't even know. And that day that I gave my son over to this lady that I didn't know, I went straight into detox that day. And I stayed in detox for 5 days. They were going to let me out on a Sunday. I was like, no, you cannot let me out. I got to stay here till Monday, because if I leave today, I'm going to get high. I knew it. I had done it 5 other times. I had been to treatment 5 times and relapsed. I had been to prison and relapsed. And so they let me stay there an extra day. I went straight into treatment. Well, got into treatment. I had a little freedom. Started having my husband bring me Xanaxes up to the treatment center. Almost got busted. Almost got kicked out. They let me stay. So I stayed sober. The last 2 weeks I was there, I was sober as a judge. I got out of treatment. My husband came and picked me up, and I was like, I wanted to get high. I cannot explain it to you any other way than the disease of addiction. Didn't care that I had a son in DHS custody.
I relate.
And I wanted to get high. I didn't know. I wanted to get high, and I didn't know what to do. And my husband came to pick me up, and he said, I got put on Suboxone while you were in treatment. And I was so mad at him. I was like, why would you do that? You just want to get high still. I had all these negative opinions of Suboxone because I'd never seen anybody be on it and be sober, you know? I'd always seen people using it to stay off of heroin and then get it when they wanted to get high.
That was me.
So,
that was me. I mean, yeah.
I was really upset with him because I had this idea that you couldn't use it and actually use it in a constructive way. And so we met with my therapist, we met with my doctor, we met with my parents, his parents, and we all sat down, and my DHS caseworker, and I decided to get on Suboxone. Now I have 2 weeks sober, nothing in my system. I got on Suboxone. It did make me tired. I was sleeping for 3 days. But after that, it was like I was a new person, but not just because of the Suboxone, because I had to fight for my son. So I went and I got into therapy. I started working the 12 steps with a sponsor. I started going to meetings whenever the door was open. I started reading and trying to learn all about my disease because I knew if there was one thing I knew for sure, I knew I was an addict, and I knew that I love my son. I knew I wanted to fight for my son. I did not want to lose him. That was never my intention. And I would, like, now when I look back on it, like, I'm so grateful that he was taken from me. That was what had to happen for me to make the change that I truly ended up making, but what Suboxone did for me was it actually allowed me to not think about drugs all the time and relapse, because that was something that was one thing that I struggled with so much, was the obsession to use was so great in my mind at all times. And I was really afraid to be on Suboxone for any long amount of time. But the longer I prayed about it, the longer I talked to my therapist, the longer I share about being on Suboxone and how much it's helped me, the more I realized that I had learned this one way of being sober, and that was the only way. And it wasn't because that was the wrong way. It was just the only way I had learned, kind of like with my religion when I was growing up. My mom taught us very strict. And so now I've learned how to be a lot more open-minded because I've been put in this situation. And that's one thing that getting on Suboxone and being in this situation, losing my son, has done for me, was it humbled me. Because now I know what it feels like to have people judge you. I know what it feels like for people to act like my sobriety isn't valid. I know what it feels like for people to look down on me because my son was taken from me. Like, these were all things that I used to do to other people. And I don't like to admit that, but I was a judgmental little snippety snip. I was a drug addict, but I thought I was better than people. I thought, well, I shoot up with clean water today, so I'm better than you. And these were things that I thought in my mind that I couldn't identify. But now when I look back on it, I realize, like, these were things that were holding me back. And so going through the process of losing my son, getting on Suboxone, and then having me and my husband fighting to get sober together and stay sober, that's changed my life, and now, I'm happy to say, like, I haven't relapsed in 4.5 years. My husband hasn't relapsed in over a year, which is a miracle for him, because he struggled a lot more than I did with getting this recovery thing, with learning that I had to change everything in my life. Like, I held on to this idea that I didn't have to change everything for so many years. And now I realize, like, everything in my life had to change. But, that's what woke me up, was my son being born and getting taken.
My dad actually says that saying I said recently, Derek, you only have to change one thing. What's that? He says everything. And you're absolutely right. And I noticed this, and I'm going to end on this note, that I think you and me have a lot in common, where we've used our recovery as weapons sometimes, and not as like as a tool to try and help. We want to fix everybody, so we want to you. And I did this to my wife, and my wife felt way overwhelmed. I'm sure you did it with your spouse, and I've done it with people in reality, like my younger brother. I mean, he used to not want to talk to me because, well, Derek's got one mission: save my ass from drugs. And instead of coming at him going, look, no judgment. Like, I get it. I totally know why you want to go hit the dope dealer up and get straight right now. Let me talk with you and just be there with you. And dude, I'm going to say this before I close out, because it's 40 minutes. Okay. We've had a great interview. This is really good. I'm glad we had this happen for our audience, for others who are witnessing this. But my brother was so bad off one time shooting coke and heroin. I thought he was going to die. Him and his wife were in there. I'm knocking on the front door. They wouldn't open it. The paranoia, the psychosis. They were up for days using coke. No sleep. It wasn't even meth. It was coke. And I came in there, and he looked and he says, bro, this look on his face, like, I can't even tell you, like, zombified. He couldn't hit a vein. And I was with him, and I was like, bro, you're going to rehab. I got you. If that means getting you straight right now, I don't care. I'm going to get you straight. We're going to rehab. He can't even hit a vein. So now I'm having to help my brother hit his vein so that he could get straight, just so it wasn't on his mind, the fear of going to detox to the rehab. And I literally shot my brother up with him, had Narcan, was very well aware of, let's get him. It was so intense. And me doing that, people were like, you didn't want to use? No, that is the last thing on my mind at this point is my brother's dying and I see it and I'm like, so today you don't want to relapse. You're tapering. I've seen the videos. And even if you don't, at the end of the day, Nicole, and you feel, I don't even have to explain this. If you feel like, oh, I don't know, you know not to do that. Don't push yourself where you can't go comfortably. And if someone's out there, I'm going to end on this. I want you to say last closing words. Someone out there right now is judged. Someone out there doesn't feel like they can go Suboxone because, hey, I'm not part of recovery, or they're afraid they're going to get addicted and hooked on it long term. Dr. B has said this before. You're homeless. You're everything's ruined in your life. Like, you're scared to get on Suboxone, but you're shooting up heroin right now. What do you say to someone out there?
Well, it was a no-brainer for me because, like I said, it changed my life forever. But what I would say is, screw what everybody else thinks. No one is going to be there for you like you're going to be there for you. Nobody has to wake up every day, take care of my son, cook dinner, wash the clothes, go to work, take care of my husband, carry the weight of the world. Like, I have to do that. I have to live this life. And one thing I had to learn was I had to stop worrying about other people's opinions of what I am doing. As long as I know in my heart that what I'm doing is right for me, that's all that matters. But because of that insecurity, that low self-esteem, I always wanted you to validate me. But what I'm learning today is I don't need anyone else to validate my recovery, because my son being healthy and happy and thriving, that is a validation of my recovery, and that's all I need.
I love it.
Because my son, oh.
I love it, Nicole, and I really appreciate that. And this is not me saying get on Suboxone. Please don't interpret my words the wrong way. I am saying there are ways, and Dr. B did a video. I'm going to reference him because you and me are huge fans of Dr. B, and I love him. Harm reduction, I love what he does. Dr. B said in his recent Kratom video that he caught some slack on from the Kratom people, okay? He said, you've got Mountain A and Mountain B. He says, you can go down through the valley, do the Suboxone route, which large-scale statistics say has worked, or you can walk the tightrope and take Kratom, or I even added one on there for him, and I said, look, Dr. B, I was at a lady's house for 4 days. I went into precipitated withdrawal, taking half a Suboxone. I freaking sucked for the first 3-4 days. I thought I was better throughout the day, so I decided I'm going home. 5th night, I got a camera in my face after watching YouTube videos. I was inspired to do a video, talk about my story, and that's my 5 days off heroin withdrawal video that I have on my channel, which everyone's aware of. When I did that, I did it completely abstinent. Now ask yourself the question, should I go out there and tell everybody, don't go to rehab, don't go to detox, don't try to go to outpatient, don't try to go to something that could possibly improve your life like that. You need to sit on a couch and detox at home, because that's the way I did it, and that's what worked for me. The statistics are not in anyone's favor at all. It's like a miracle that I even made it on a couch. You see what I'm saying?
It is. It is. And a lot of people don't make it doing that. And that's why that my whole thing is, you got to do what works for you. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're someone that has to go to work tomorrow. Maybe you're somebody that has children and you have to get up and actually do your duties as a parent. Like, being on maintenance is not for everybody, but it can help you, and you don't have to stay on it. I've been on maintenance for 4 years because it is really helpful.
I think we lost her. She probably got a phone call. It's okay. She'll be right back. There she is. I knew you had a phone call. I said.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it could go through. I had to learn that, like I said, it's not for everyone. I don't want anyone to think that me and Derek are coming on here and saying, we think everyone should get on Suboxone, because I do not think that. I think some people do horribly on Suboxone. Their body responds to it badly. They want to abuse it. They want to snort it, inject it, whatever. You have to decide for yourself. And the only way you can do that is by trying different ways to get sober. I tried everything. I tried abstinence. I tried 5 rehabs. I tried going to prison. I mean, I tried standing on my head and twerking in the backyard to stay sober, and that didn't work. You know what I mean? Like, you have to try different things, but the way drugs are today, you don't have time to be trying a whole bunch of things. So save your own ass and get your life together. Don't keep trying and then die on fentanyl.
Reach out to one of us, and if you like what you see and what you hear, go check out Nicole's channel, because she really is trying to help people as much as possible. I know a lot of people have misinterpreted you. I've misinterpreted you. I think we've had our clash, but look, recovery's great. You know, it really is a great thing that I can learn to overcome situations like I've never thought I could in recovery, because making amends, man, like, that's what life's about. Nicole, thank you for joining me. Real Talk Recovery, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you guys go check her out, subscribe, show her some love. And you know what my mama told me? If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it. Just go do your own thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, just don't, you know. But I love you guys, and thank you for joining me, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Derek, for real.
Hey, we'll do this again at some point. I've got so many interviews I have to do. And there's, oh goodness, I got to catch up. So I love you and thank you for what you do.
On your channel, like, that's all I wanted to, know, like, this is such a big opportunity for me. I take these things so seriously. Like, the chance to go on Death's channel, like, that was such a huge opportunity for me. I realized how hard it is to build your audience and get to that subscriber count. So I appreciate you putting me on your channel, because it's a huge opportunity for my channel to have more exposure to more people. So it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Make your own channel. Tell your own story and let one of us know. We'll come show you some love. I love you guys. Big D.